historians or lawyers. There are lots of things which are so. The partition you make between digitized and digital is not actually, we should forget about the digitized, right? I mean, it's not that sharp.
No. So there. I mean, arguably. I mean, I'm not so big on ontological distinctions, but arguably, there are those documents, as well as methods that have been sort of born in the medium, and there are those that have migrated to it. So the basic distinction is between those that are digitized and those that are natively digital. So this is, so that's the first step. So the question that I like to ask is what kind of research can be done with the digitized methods, and what kind of research could be done if we were to think about digital methods? It's quite a different kind of research program. Normally, with digitized methods, the emphasis is on user studies. So you're studying how users make use of whatever they make use of. Whereas, at least as I put forward today, the digital methods are more research into information cultures. But anyway, it's not to in the least bit belittle digitized methods, which are oftentimes called virtual methods. They've made huge progress, and it's work well done. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to contextualize it. It's a particular type of internet research, and what we are increasingly seeing, arguably, is research that is not, let's say, about the internet, but uses the internet as a data set. Yeah? So it's the difference between studying, let's say, online culture only and studying culture with the online. So this is the argument in a nutshell.
This is very important for us. Yes. I think you need a sorry. This is for recording, so you still have to speak loud.
Oh, okay. You mentioned at the beginning the sort of not so new realization that the web is not a virtual space, but rather complements actual space. And I think what's very interesting is how detailed your study then of what's happening in the space of the web is. And I wonder if you might expand a bit on how some of your research is in fact looking at relationships to what you're seeing on the web and physical space. For example, the study of the nature of the web in Iraq. And I think what your findings about the health or the state of the web in Iraq tell you about what's happening in the physical space there.
Yeah. So the first, thank you very much. The first remark is concerns this idea of where's the ground. So this is a huge issue. So the initial example, at least for me, was if you read something on the web, do you then subsequently call the person up to find out if it's true? Or do you call someone up and ask them something, and then you look up on the web to see whether it's true? Where does checking begin and where does it end? Yeah? This is the ground or the baseline. So this is the first issue with respect to the relationship, the sort of new relationships between the real and the virtual, if you will. So it's the question of where's the ground and how it's shifting. And then the second thing is can we use the web, and when can we use the web, and how can we use the web as the ground, as the baseline? So the example that I gave about Iraq was to introduce another ground. I mean, I could be less radical and say introduce another account. Huh? Right? I could say, so we have 4 meta accounts, let's say, right? There's sort of the news, there's the military, there are a few sort of senators going there and actually going to the ground, and they're being filmed. And then there are Iraqi bloggers. See, these are the kind of sources. And so those are sort of 4 accounts, and they oftentimes conflict. And so I'm adding a 5th account. But I'm actually also adding a 5th, or proposing another ground. And so the idea was to see whether we could get an indication of what's going on in Iraq by studying its web. And it was very fascinating that, I mean, we found, for example, that the only fresh websites of the 2,000 that we had in our sample, the only fresh websites were oil-related. The only ones. Yeah? All the other ones were stale, were broken, or were otherwise gone. Yeah. So that gives you, so all the oil-related sites were sort of happening, you know, and all the other ones, and yeah. So I mean, that just gives you one sort of example of, okay, here's an account of what's going on in Iraq. What portion of the Iraqi web is currently thriving? I could provide a lot more detail, but that provides you an example.
Professor Becker, and I introduce because tomorrow is going to speak at 7:15 in the same room about a topic which is not completely unrelated.
Thanks. So this is a fascinating and extremely productive presentation, I thought, and systematizing the various approaches. I have 1.5 questions, one of which is a repeat of the same question. The first question is, you make a very stark break, 2007 and on, study with regard to grounding in the net, and it strikes me that there are really 2 quite distinct research questions. The first one is, how does life change given that there is a domain of action that is the web, that intersects with behavior in life, which requires you to, which perhaps makes it easier to study on, to study through the web, and presents different, and what you're looking for is differences in practice between the state of action without the web and the state of action with it. And your baseline and what you're comparing to are either existing practices that are not yet well web-based, or historical snapshots of things that were not web-based, in order to see how life changes and how practice changes with and without, which is what I thought you described as the project of 2000 to 2007. And there's a question. So the broad question is calibration, right? How do you know how to understand and interpret what you're finding? And the first domain of problem is, how do you know how what you're finding reflects changes that are due to the introduction of this new set of interfaces and capabilities and communication into social practices that pre-existed it. And the second is what you described 2007 on, which is using the web as a mechanism for studying life necessarily with the web, but life not as it relates to the web necessarily, but rather as a portal into life. And there again, this is the repeated question of how you think about calibration. And the difficulty arises from the fact that you're using a method to look at behavior that already uses that, the machine, as it were. And so the question is, to what extent you can, what are your baselines against which you're calibrating, to what extent the behavior that you're identifying differs from the behavior as it's practiced in the world by people who aren't practicing it through the web, particularly since you mentioned digital divide. Are there particular populations that are particularly hard to identify? Are there certain behaviors where web culture is an overlay over real world culture, so that you need to calibrate your results, and how do you do that?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So what I'm actually discussing for the most part, at least initially, is